know, as we warmed up for the panel, and I'm sure, Maria, you have more to say on the regulation side and what that might unlock in a little bit.
Yes, maybe I can take it from the supply producer side. Absolutely. Look, this is a collaborative effort because it's about reaching certain goals, and the regulators put the objectives this high, and the market to actually say, okay, I'm going to invest in projects that are fully committed to produce green molecules. I think we can capture not only in the green hydrogen, but green molecules as ammonia, etc. But it does not end there. I really need to make the step up in the supply, and for the investors and the financiers to help the producers make that big jump. We need to have clarity on regulation, but also in the transport and in the off-taker. So everything is very, very related. Why? Because this is the starting, the first baby steps of the hydrogen economy. So I think it's ambitious. Next year, I think it will be very much like this year. But if we put our heads into, you know, have some more clarity on the next short-term steps, we will make it through the future years. So I'm not worried about next year. I'm worried about 5 to 10 years, because we really need to make things properly, otherwise it's not going to happen. And I'm very positive. I don't want to leave a negative message, but it's really something that we do along the way on the whole channel. A little bit on regulation, and maybe you will we will talk about this later. Green hydrogen is very much related to either photovoltaic or wind connected to the installation. At least in Europe, it's very much the case. If the burdens start before, so if we are not clear on how to develop true 100% renewable connected to the green hydrogen through electrolyzers, then we won't be able to make it. So what we are saying is that, as we've seen, and this is an oil-producing country. I'm also an oil and gas employee from my years, so I'm very much into the energy mix. This is the key. We are in the transition. Transition means we are transitioning. Now we all a bit forget about this. So if we transition, we need to make things right to show the market that it will take more than 1 year. It will take 5 or 10 years to be there.
I think we see two sides of why these projects have been delayed, and by knowing that, we can get to see of how we can solve them. I think the first point would be regulations and policies that for some geographies have been put in place, but the end users are not seeing the finances yet. So regulation, today we have about 41 countries in the world which have regulation established, green hydrogen policies established. So we all know about the IRA, the Repower EU, and so on. But 41 countries have a plan. Now, pragmatically, how does it work and how do they get the finance? It's a different story. And many end users are actually complaining that they didn't get the finance back. So I think that's the point number one. Point number two is what we have seen as an EPC, so starting with Technip Energies, and we see that as well with NT Energies in the region. The costs have increased. We all know that. There were studies, for example, in the Gulf Coast in the US, where it was from the Hydrogen Council. They mentioned that over the last 2 years, in 2021, we were expecting the green hydrogen at 5 to 6 euros per kilogram. Then people started to work in the details of the balance of stack, the balance of plant, the whole thing, establishing the right quantities and so on, and then we see that actually the costs have increased. You add to that inflation in the world, the cost of electricity, the cost of financing. So capex have increased, and actually in the Gulf of in the US, they mentioned 115% increase of capex in 2 years. Electricity cost about plus 30%. OPEX plus 10%. And then the cost of financing, cost of capital, which is plus 70%. So it's a drastic increase, and I think now all players are looking at, okay, how can we work together? And I think it's a lot about working together, trust. How can we bring this LCOH down in order to get confidence to the owners that, yes, they should be able to take investment decisions?
So I don't disagree. Obviously, one of the things, Europe is kind of the birthplace of the hydrogen economy. It's been pushing it away for years. I was over at the Hydrogen Europe conference earlier this year, and one of the startling numbers that came out of that was compound average growth rate, if it sticks as it is today, would see us at 2030 having about 1 gigawatt installed. So that's obviously a very sobering assessment of, what would you say, progress to date. So I want to stick with it a little bit and just, there's more optimism that things can increase and be better next year. Can I offer a second question, being all angry and perma-bearish about it? How does the panel feel about electrolyzer production, the capacity ramp up there? I remember at the beginning of the year, as 2023 got underway, a lot of people were talking about there's going to be a glut of electrolyzers, which caused great merriment in my office. I didn't share that view. By mid-year, there's been this rising concern that cheap Chinese electrolyzers are going to flood the market. As we close the year, the news from China is that the capacity additions are not going to happen there because they are not seeing the demand to support it. This obviously knocks on down the road as FIDs start to loom. So I'll ask the question, as FIDs come closer, will there be supply available? Because no electrolyzers, no green hydrogen. And anyone, again, on the panel that would like to rebut me?
Yeah, maybe I can start. So, yes, you're absolutely right. I think the short story is 8% of the all electrolyzers players have taken investment decisions on their gigafactories. I think they were planning to, like at the end of 2022, so a year ago, it was planned that there would be 14 gigawatt per year of manufacturing capacity, so 14 gigawatt per year planned, and actually I've realized at the end of so that was in early 2022, I've realized at the end of the year only just above 1 gigawatt per year capacity. Today, at the end of 23, I don't know, but we probably are in a range of 2, 3. And there are some geographies where it's hard to get the figures, but I think the overall plan today, if we sum all the announced capacities, it's about 155 gigawatt per year by 2030. 155 gigawatt per year. It's a lot. I think today the players are cautious, and I think they are absolutely right to be cautious. They can only make investment decisions once they have some kind of certainty on the market. And you know, all the signals we get from the market today are there is no certainty. So that's why I think the investment decisions on gigafactories have been much slower than what they were planned. And I think it will only continue. I mean, some are making decisions and are taking risk, which is, I think, measured risk, but it will not be the big ramp up that was announced like 2 years ago. I don't think so.
Can I react? I really feel like we need to talk. We need to continue talking. My personal experience on my company is developing a project which would be very large scale for European standards. no? And it's about 1.2 gigawatts of photovoltaic and 650 megawatts of electrolyzer. And we are starting to talk to technology providers and EPCs about the electrolyzer. And we are, facing that the technology needs a lot of learning yet, but from both sides. So the RFP might be like dual. We ask questions that trigger some other questions. How can I make the current technology of the electrolyzer work for such a big and large scale? By scaling up modules, now we are facing 5 megawatts. I cannot use modules of 5 megawatts. The next generation, I'm talking about 20, and the wildest is 60 megawatts. Still, 10 times that would be, as I said, one of the largest electrolyzer in Europe, which is nothing compared to what it's doing in China and here in the Middle East. So I think it's a bit of, the market is there, the demand for the electrolyzer is there, it's definitely there. We want to do this and we are gonna be buying very soon. So maybe a positive note to the manufacturing companies and technology companies, but we need to understand what are the needs for that. And very recently also, and I was also in Brussels 2 weeks ago in the European week, and I have the opportunity to discuss very technical details on performance. The performance quality levels of the electrolyzer varies enormously depending on what would be the green molecule produced afterwards. So it's not the same if you're going to produce only green hydrogen compared to green ammonia, compared to green methanol. It's different. Okay, so then let's start again. What is it that I'm going to be producing for what? What is my last client in the chain? And then we start producing. It's kind of tailor-made as we speak now. I think we are going to be reducing that gap of knowledge very soon. But again, it's about, it's not 1 year. It might be more than 2 or 3 years. And for the ones that we have FID very soon, yeah, well, maybe we could use the delays on the regulation on our benefit for that. That's a positive.
I'm going to stick with you for a second. My last question on the supply side, on the green hydrogen side. One of the key issues that I've heard repeatedly talked about this year from electrolyzer producers, from EPCM firms, has been the issue of standardization. And I think this is a very good time to talk about that because we talked about the world's largest plant there, and there's been news circulating that electrolyzer components from 3 different producers, which sounds challenging to integrate because they're non-standard. So are you seeing any progress there?
I would say not yet there. No, I think we are in the good progress, but we've seen certifications efforts kind of secure that it's 100% green hydrogen, so that's the first step. Performance and technicalities behind that is also taken into account, safety, but you see it's kind of in little boxes. We don't have like a horizontal regulation on certification for green hydrogen yet. We need to do that. And it's not only on one side that we will do it. So again, not yet there, but we are in the process to know what we need to know in order to make it happen. I think that would be the summary.
And if I could just go down to the end, fully 50% of costs now, 50% costs stack, 50% balance of plant. That standardization there for modular components, how effective is that going to be in terms of bringing down costs? I'm straying off the topic of supply here, but it is an important one to ask because obviously for the ALK modules are now in 5 megawatt size. PEMs, yes, I know they're getting bigger, but broadly still 1. Are there economies of scale that you can see coming through there? How important is it?
Yeah, so what we have seen is that Technip Energies, by working with a lot of electrolyzer suppliers, we have assessed that there was a high potential for optimization in the balance of stack. You know, all the OEMs are working hard on the technology, and I agree with Maria that we're probably not there yet. I mean, there are lots of expectations, and And we need to provide confidence to owners that the performance guarantees can be done, and that the safety is behind, and so on. But what we have seen actually is that on the balance of stack, if you compare 100 megawatt of green hydrogen to the same capacity in gray hydrogen, so roughly the same capacity of 10,000 tons per day, a green hydrogen plant will take about 270 pieces of equipment. A gray hydrogen will take about 70 pieces of equipment. So 270 versus 70. And what we think, what we think is that there is a lot of optimization possible, so standardization, modularization, and so on, in the balance of stack, in the balance of plant. Working as well with the supply chain, establishing frame agreements with vendors, and really looking for a lean solution. Obviously, safety should be the first criteria, but definitely there is a potential for optimization, and that's why we created Relay.
Okay, my last grumpy question on the supply side, and then we've got to move on. One of the headlines from COP was blue hydrogen. I know this is a topic, is green hydrogen. I have to bring this up. Blue hydrogen carbon intensity has been under scrutiny again, this time from the US Department of Energy. The world is now falling into two camps in terms of where carbon intensity limits lie. 4 kilograms in some areas, for example, South Korea, Brazil, 3.4, Japan, Europe, elsewhere. So those are the limits being set at the top. The figures put out by the US DOE put them around 4.5 to 5.7 kilograms CO2 per kilogram of hydrogen. So that calls its viability into question again. I spent a lot of time in Northeast Asia as well. There's some long supply chains there that are looking at blue ammonia for direct use. Putting aside, if we put, calling blue hydrogen into question, putting aside the 7 million ton a year supply gap that would cause in Europe, and the holes that would put in the individual national plans for the UK, for Holland, for who else is there? Oh, Norway, how can I forget? What does the panel think might be the knock-on effects on infrastructure if blue hydrogen doesn't work? So we're looking at TSOs within Europe, looking at pipelines. For example, they're expecting a certain amount of flow by 2030, for example. What are the knock-on effects? Anyone?
We spoke about this a little bit a bit earlier. I think I'm slightly in two minds about blue hydrogen and sort of role. I think, for decarbonizing existing grey hydrogen production absolutely makes sense. But carbon capture technology still has a long way to go, and I think there are possibly some better uses for it. Irrespective of that, I think there's a significant sort of need to just get more hydrogen being used. And where that sort of end use is, we can talk about in a second, I'm sure. But the risk of people saying, well, actually, you know what, I don't need to build all of these pipelines, I don't need to build storage tankers, I don't need to build, whatever it happens to be around the infrastructure side, could be, I think, very detrimental, which I think is, sort of where you're going with this as well, Tim. The challenge is that we just sort of need to get hydrogen into the economy, into industry as quickly as possible, build up that acceptance and build up that understanding of how you manage your supply chain around it, because it will be like anything. As companies get more and more advanced, is how do they manage that supply chain, and hydrogen will be just another element that they need to start juggling. And if the infrastructure is there, or isn't there, that will be even harder to do.
Maria, does that concern you at all if there's going to be a reduced volume of hydrogen, not just on the pipelines? I'm not sure how relevant it is in terms of where you're looking to move material, but obviously there's also knock-on effects on things like cracking facilities, on storage. Do those get pushed back another 2 years? Am I going to have to listen to another 2 years of the chicken and egg? Please no.
Yeah, please no. We can say this is circle also. I would like to think that all the pieces come together, and if we in 2 years see that blue hydrogen is not making the path, it's not necessarily affecting green hydrogen, but maybe I'm wrong. We need all to convey into what works on each end. But at the point of the needs of the different energy sources cannot burden the necessity to progressively get into a lower reduction on the carbon in the air. No? So whether we make it through different sources or we accommodate post-combustion, no? If maybe that implies that CCUS or DAC gets better exposed, and then we, make it through the 100% avoiding fossil fuel, which should be the objective, no? Like in a summary, in a nutshell, worldwide. So I'm not so concerned on that backlash, but I'm more concerned in focusing the efforts and what it work for the market itself. I think right now, in the off-taking part, they know what they want to do, but it's not mandatory yet, so it's a little, effort on their part to meet that point. But also the infrastructure. Maybe we can also talk on the transportation and infrastructure, and here my colleague, of course, can add. It's so key to make it happen to door to the whoever needs to buy it, being that so blue hydrogen, blue ammonia, green, whatever color it is. And please bear with me, even pink, no problem. I mean, if we have the source that can be considered low carbon to zero or completely zero, and we are deploying the molecule to convey into a greener consumption, we will decarbonize. And the main objective is to decarbonize. So it is production, but the gold medal goes for the hard-to-abate sector that needs to do that. So yes, it can be a little bit adding the fire of whoever does not believe in this effort, but I think it not necessarily will affect overall the sum up of the green hydrogen or green molecule. But I'm very much interested in what my colleague thinks about it.
Yes, as a potential off-taker, and yes, and so yeah, actually, so the color doesn't matter actually, and so for the off-taker side, so I think for the producer side also the has a perfect the definition of carbon intensity, for the clean energy. As actually, so maritime industry is regulated by IMO, and so we are waiting for the definition, clear definition of clean energy, and yes, so now our company is seeking both blue and green. And so actually, so we don't know which way, which methodology is better and sustainable. But in my understanding, so blue maybe is such as a transition and bridge to the green energy. And so now, so yeah, we really expect the green energy for the marine fuel. And of course, needless to say, Oman has a very good condition, and the solar and the wind, and plus the location is very good, and the Oman can aim to the Pacific and the Atlantic as a swing player. And so now, as a off-taker side, yes, we need the clear definition, yes, to move, yes.
Understood. I'm going to move on to the demand side. I wanted to come down and ask how it affects the supply-demand balance, but maybe we can come back to that a little bit later, Bertrand. Let's move on to the demand side, and I'll get rid of my grumpiness now a little bit, because I am actually quite happy about the demand side from where I sit, a bit more optimistic at least. We've seen lots of consumption announcements have been quite broad-based among a number of sectors, steel, ferts, e-fuels, and I want to come back to you, Akio. Just one of the questions I have is, how conditional are you and your peers' demand? Because obviously dual fuel capability is a free option. It's not a commitment. How conditional is it on suppose, availability, given the previous section, and cost?
Yes, so definitely, so for the criteria of energy is the first one is the economical point. So it must be price competitive, and also stable. So for example, as a maritime industry, we never stop the vessels for our customers. So we need a stable energy, and so basically, stable and cost competitive is the definitely the conditions for new energy. And so actually, I think that many people is wondering. So for example, in maritime industry, there are several options as a clean energy, methanol, ammonia, and hydrogen. Actually, so currently, so it's hard to tell to make a decision, and but in terms of stable supply, ammonia would be promising fuel. Yes.
Oh, you're being offered longer offtake
Yes,
durations.
yes. Because so ammonia can be used widely. For example, so Japan tried to introduce ammonia to coal power station. So actually, so there is a very hard criticism. Yeah, but the coal power station is needed to supply the power stably, and so actually, so unfortunately, so renewable energy is not stable. In Japan, for example, sometimes the wind condition is bad, and if there is a snow, the solar power stops. So in such case, coal power and natural gas-fired power plant has to generate as a backup. And so it's very significant to promote decarbonization of the coal power station, and ammonia can be used such as the coal power station directly, and so I think the ammonia will be the widely used in many industry, and so now Japanese EPC company try to invest to the ammonia gas turbine, and this machine can use ammonia directly, and also the vessels can use ammonia for maritime fuel, and so currently, what is the most promising fuel for industry, heavy industry? So my answer is ammonia. Yes, right now, yes.
Can I ask Oliver, just we're talking about demand here, when a supplier finds someone that has demand, willing to sit down and talk, to get finance, that offtake remains absolutely crucial. Is there anything that can help FID move forward at this stage? Is there anything that comes to mind? It might not be, because we haven't spoken about it.
Yeah, I think when you're looking on a project finance basis, the offtake is still really that crucial bit. I mean, we've got a number of transactions we're working on at the moment, different geographies. I think I earlier saw David from Neon Green Hydrogen over there, which I worked at when I was at Standard Chartered until over the summer. And obviously the offtake very crucial in a project like Neon. The ones that we're looking at and we're helping to raise funds on the equity and debt side, we're really seeing that people are looking to see that there's a strong engineering package in place, that a lot of the work has been done before they want to start coming in and having those conversations on the equity side. They're looking to see, if not all of the offtake secured, but progress on the offtake. Depending on who it is, some of the investors are more willing to play an active role in helping to secure those offtakes where they think that's something they can add value in. But I think it's not like a renewables IPP project where the formula is pretty standardized and you can kind of drag and drop it a little bit. It is a bit of a jigsaw puzzle that needs to be put together. So many different parties need to be assembled. that getting to FID is taking time, and I think we will, as more projects sort of do get close, see that accelerates. But I don't think there's one sort of magic, if we do this, then this is what's going to bring it forward by 6 months. Unless, of course, if you can get your off-takers secured earlier, then that's obviously a key roadblock that does seem to be taking longer than most other bits.
Absolutely. We're at the end of the year, and I want to just ask you very briefly on the demand side, have things changed over the course of this year? From January to December, are you seeing any different conviction people coming out of the woodwork and saying, me please, or is it broadly the same for the projects that you're looking at?
It is very promising. I think being in the side of being able to promise that large volumes of hydrogen will be in the market very soon is appealing enough for transport operators, but also off-takers to believe that if they also make that leap and that effort, is because of something and at a reasonable price, because that's what it ends. So I've seen a lot of movement on the demand. I agree with you. Still, when you get into the details, and I mean not only memo use, when you get into head of terms binding, because they try to twist your arm and then put gray hydrogen prices. Well, not yet there. We will make it happen. Okay, everybody has their interest, and it won't be 100% on one side or the other. It will be something in between, with funding, etc. also in the first moment. But I've seen some progress and maybe envisioning for the next year, and with the good news that we heard this morning from just a few kilometers away. It feels very exciting that it is in everybody's mind, no matter that you're in energy or not energy, that this is for good. So being in this sector is very, very promising. And well, what I would add is that producers from Spain in this case and in Europe, we will have a say, but we cannot do this alone. So very happy to also learn all the people's lessons on the producer side to help develop properly, and also very, very happy to see that there are a lot of conscience of how to do that. So by listening my colleague, ammonia is the route, okay, let's go there. Maybe we have some challenge and we can face other type of green molecules, maybe methanol, but if we choose the route, let's make it happen.
Bertrand, you're far away from me. I won't let you escape me. We've just talked about supply and demand, and it's obviously a great chance to ask you how that synthesis is affecting your 2030 views on the supply-demand balance. Have things changed over this year for you?
Yeah, I can answer that. Just to follow up on what Maria was saying, what we see is that projects, we as EPC players, we have a limited understanding of the price gap between the expectation from the owner, the end user, and us, EPC, providing a price. And what we perceive is that there is a difference per the segment of the customer. So for example, steel industry, we perceive there are some expectations on price gap, or let's say the price gap is higher than what it is for other end users, such as refining, chemicals, and so on. And I'm back to the point of the policies and the regulations. I think if they could be more targeted at the segment of the end user, that could help potentially to accelerate. Now, our vision by 2030, on your question, we have seen for the expected FIDs that probably should have taken place, or let's say they were announced at the end of 2022, announced for 2023, roughly 1 gigawatt did not take place. We haven't seen these FIDs. They were delayed to 2024, and for some of them, actually, beyond that, 2025 and 2026. So the vision is that for 2030, still we have out of the 400 gigawatt that everybody knows announced, actually it's more than 2/3 that are just announced off the press and are not even in a feasibility stage. I mean, it's hard to say. If I could know, I would be super happy, but no, I don't have that crystal ball. I think we all hope it will accelerate, because I think when we talk about blue ammonia, the debate that we need to have is I think we need to have a look at a more holistic view of the market, and take into account all the greenhouse gas emissions. The effect of methane, for example, should be taken into account. Not only the CO2. Yes, CO2 is an important topic, but I think we are all here because we have a meaning behind the role that we can all have for the climate change. And I think we need to have a look at the holistic picture, taking into account the effect of all emissions.
I see this as being quite net short by 2030, but that's because of my predilection for being bearish. Oliver, Bertrand just brought up a point about talking about specific subsidies, really, there. You're talking about the steel sector. We've seen some subsidies being announced now in places like France and Holland to help refining or steel sectors. I just wanted to come back and ask you just about the FID side. For financiers, if there's a CFD mechanism in place, does that make the project more bankable? Does it take away some of the necessity for the full offtake? I mean,
well, the simple answer is it can do. Obviously, everything's going to be sort of looked at on a project-by-project basis, regime-by-regime basis. But I think, if you look at subsidies more broadly and sort of the environment that's been created in the US with the IRA, this can be a great tool to get things started. Now, the problem comes when you have sort of political risk around it. You look at the IRA, we have no idea what's going to happen next year. We have no idea whether it could suddenly all disappear, and what's that going to do to some of the supply. Now, thankfully, we've got a few projects we've been working on that were being planned and developed pre-IRA. So we're still hopeful that those will get over the line, that was a sweetener rather than the entire sort of justification for them. But there are some that are effectively IRA plays. So there's that element. The other element is that continually subsidizing something isn't the way to get an industry going, or to sustain an industry. It's a good way to get it going, but you don't want to be constantly having to subsidize and subsidize and subsidize. You need to have a way that you can put subsidies in, get things started, and then let them come away, or direct them to different bits. And I think we're talking about the demand side here. To me, that's really going to be the crucial bit. We've seen a lot that's been more sort of supply side driven. How do we start getting this going to be more active on the demand side? Because that's going to be what starts addressing some of those pricing sort of expectation gaps. If you look at the sectors that are really going to be the hardest to decarbonize, should be the ones where we need to be pushing this forwards. But again, thinking about, and I guess it's not that easy when you've got 4 or 5 year election cycles to deal with, but thinking about, well, how do you build a 2030 economy, a 2040 economy, a 2050 economy, and how do those actions or that you take today need to then be adjusted over time to fit into those future scenarios is going to be a challenge that I'm very grateful that I'm not in government and having to make those decisions myself, as to be said.
It sounds like the globalization of the ETS via CBAM and other, we were talking about the mechanism where you step back from providing subsidies is quite important. And we're seeing that other areas like Singapore now, they're moving in the next month from, I think, $5 per ton to 25. Looking forward in their 2 years, that goes up to 45. I've seen some interesting numbers coming out of Europe in terms of shadow pricing going up to sort of 150 by 2030, and that being incentivizing additional investment. So yes, an interesting side. Let's move quickly onto the pricing trends, and I'll start my preamble. I always sound really bearish, and I apologize. I'm going to have a really big smile on my face by the end as we get to the investment opportunity, I promise. So on the pricing trends, cost was supposed to fall. We've updated our models again. Not only did debt go up, cost of electrolyzers increased. We were hoping for some increases in efficiency, and actually what we've seen is more conservatism among the electrolyzer manufacturers over the course of this year. There was some efforts to shrink membranes and things like that, but then durability became the thing that they really wanted to focus on, and so we didn't see that increase in efficiency, and costs rose. That's obviously going the wrong way. Let me ask Maria, how is that affecting your project economics? Is this cranking the Excel spreadsheet?
It is as part of the process, as I think the same can apply to any other industrial process. I would like to also make some comments on the subsidy, because I totally agree with my colleague. It cannot be forever. It needs to help on the first bit and then to make it future-proof. And the way I think it can be a good idea is by subsidizing the part of the uptaking. Because if we put the money for the pure capex, that don't help, that it creates, a sensation that is cheaper of what it is. No, what we need to make is something that is competitive enough to pay for all the, the past change of the cost. By doing that, you reduce the gap, the delta from, and what is, this is very simple decision. Do I keep buying gray hydrogen or gray molecule or etc., or do I make my transition into that? And that is what defines the rest, defines the LCOH, and of course that depends on the volumes that you are producing. That's the bet of my company, going large to reduce the LCOH to minimum. Being door to door, and if it cannot be because of obvious reasons, the transport needs to be there. So maybe we need to subsidize a bit, few years, the transport, and I mean dedicated hydroducts or transforming into carriers that can actually make happen at the beginning, and then of course compete fairly to the rest of the molecules. The price is, I'm not avoiding the answer. It sounds like I'm doing it, but I'm not doing it on a purpose. It's because we do have a lot of panels that discuss the price. And it's a little bit tricky, because if I say now 9, people would say, well, that's horrible. But if I say 1, same people would say, this lady doesn't know what she's talking about. Well, that's exactly what is going on. So I prefer not to mention a price and leave it open to what is doable right now. It can be arranged exactly in that same 1 to 9. And we might be ending in something around 4. But will that define the market by a price? I don't think so. We need to do so much before, being very, very conscious on the electrolyzer technology, the LCOH, as I said, the transport, and who wants to buy that. Why? Because it doesn't matter that I promise a very cheap green hydrogen if I cannot produce more than 2 megas. That doesn't make any change in the market. It needs to be future-proof and for large volumes. And it's okay to say that we are not yet competitive, because we are going to be doing it together. So that would be my answer to the price, if I may.
Rising prices, that trend is not a friend. Akio, is this increasing wariness among yourselves and your peers for green ammonia and for green e-methanol? Is this increasing concern around going more decarbonized and pushing people towards the blue products?
Yes, definitely. So basically, the regulation and the incentives like a subsidy leads to demand creation, and in our industry, so IMO regulation is very significant, and so many people criticize maritime industry decarbonization action is very slow, but this year IMO finally announced that so maritime industry will reach zero emission by 2050. But in the previous the strategy, only the 50% reduction by 2050. But this is a very good progress. And so as you said, the 2030 is a milestone year for maritime industry also. And so by 2030, the maritime industry will introduce at least 5% zero emission fuel and technology to the vessels. And during a COP28, so the several shipping company as a fast mover, including our company, agreed we increase the target percentage from 5% to 10% of the zero emission fuel to our vessel. So definitely, we have to increase our interest on the ammonia and methanol also. And so unfortunately, so in maritime industry, there is no subsidy actually, and so we cannot run away, and so we have to seriously consider the introduction of clean energy. Yes, yes.
We're running close to time here. I'm going to ask. I do want to ask about the investment opportunities, and obviously, I don't want to work way down the panel. We're going to have to keep it quite quick. Are there areas which you see as hot right now, or gaps in capabilities or investments that need plugging? So, any of those, hot sector, hot industry, hot customer.
It's difficult to keep it short, but I would say yes, and in every piece of the market. If the investment is true, is real, I think it's a very nice place to be in the next years, because still a gap of learning. So that means cheap now. Whatever wants to be in this sector and want to be a little bit cheap, be a front runner, take the risk on the development and in any area, transport, off-taking, and supply.
Any area that you see as particularly needing investment at this point, or are you just going to say that shipping is hot?
Yes, for shipping side, yes. So producer side, okay. So producer is ready for produce ammonia and hydrogen. And for shipping company, it's okay to transport ammonia and hydrogen at large scale. And the problem is that concerning bunkering for the ship receiving vessels, we need to build up the new supply chain, and we have to invest in the receiving tank onshore, and also we have to invest in the bunkering vessels. And so sometimes this is a halfway point between producer side and off-taker side. I have several discussions with the producer side, but the producer side, okay, do this. Yeah. Off-taker must prepare, but for off-taker side, no, do this. Producer side prepares. So now, it's the half midpoint. So in order to build a new supply chain for vessels, we need a cooperation between supplier side and off-taker side. This is a hot topic for me. Yes, thank you.
Well, there are definitely lots of investment opportunities. So you said you'd have a smile on your face by the end, and I think that's one thing that there is a lot of. I spent a lot of time when I was at COP talking to people about this missing middle of climate tech investment. In tech banking, you have the valley of death. We're calling it the dunes of doom. Stole it from someone, not sure who, but I like the dunes of doom, and obviously very topical for the region, where there's this gap in this growth stage climate technology companies, and I think for hydrogen this is very much the case, whether that's more on the technology side, the electrolyzer companies, or on the project side as well, where it's too capital intensive for your traditional VCs that are much more comfortable with software, but it's not really infra enough yet for your traditional infrastructure investors that are used to sort of mega projects of billions and billions of dollars. Now, the quick plug of sort of some of the stuff that Barclays is doing, which I avoided until right at the end. We have a commitment that by the end of 2027, we'll invest £500 million into climate tech startups through our sustainable impact capital proposition. And we've invested in a number of hydrogen companies already, whether that's GeoPura, which is now the biggest consumer and producer of green hydrogen in the UK. They're tackling diesel generators and doing sort of off-grid green hydrogen electricity. Zero Avia, that's hydrogen electric aviation, or a company called Protium that's sort of looking at hydrogen as a service to sort of help not only produce green hydrogen, but work with end consumers to work out how hydrogen can decarbonize their businesses and then deliver that as a solution. We've made those investments. There are others in the space. The reason we're doing that is one, we see a role to scale up, but there's a lot of really exciting stuff to be able to invest in. And then what we're then looking to do is help people, so that's Series A, Series B, take you from Series C to IPO to the debt capital markets as you grow, because there is appetite to put money to work in this space. It's challenging, and people are being cautious, but the opportunities are clearly there.
Bertrand.
I think for next year, the hotspots for EPC players will be to obviously reduce cost and being able to demonstrate that we can reduce cost and provide performance guarantees over the life of the assets. Yeah, that's short.
Short but sweet. Well, look, I wanted to ask one more question, but we are out of time, unfortunately. The panel have been really good today because they didn't see those questions in advance off the top of their heads, so they did very well, and with a grumpy presenter as well, so please give them a round of applause. Thank you very much.
Can we please stand up for a picture? Thanks to our speakers for the insightful session. Thank you so much. I would like to introduce you to the last session of the day. The next panel who will be speaking about challenge hydrogen production at scale. Please welcome our moderator, Javier Dobles. our panelists, David Admonson, Monica Trench, Harriam Park, Mr. Mark, and Tony Neyman.
Okay, shall we start? So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this panel on the challenge of producing hydrogen at scale. So 7% of the more than 1,000 clean hydrogen projects globally, only 7% have reached FID or are under construction. How can that be when we know that clean hydrogen is a major decarbonization lever for industries such as steel, aviation, or shipping? If we are to meet the goals of the Paris Agreement and decarbonize our societies, clean hydrogen demand will need to represent between 300 to 500 million tons per annum by 2050. And yet, we are very far from that. Many reasons have been mentioned: the difficulty to secure a long-term offtake, the insufficient policy support, the lack of infrastructure, the higher than anticipated costs. All these are very valid reasons. But what is clear is that by 2030, we will not have enough clean hydrogen production if we continue at this pace, because it's the projects today that need to start moving faster, given the time it takes to develop and construct them. So what is concretely required to scale the clean hydrogen industry? And in particular, what are the additional challenges as well as opportunities of developing gigawatt-scale projects, precisely those large projects that are required to really move the scale and provide enough supply? This is exactly what we're going to discuss in this panel. My name is Javier Doblas. I'm a partner at Boston Consulting Group, leading our work on clean hydrogen in the Middle East. And today, I'm joined by esteemed speakers from the largest and most prominent clean hydrogen projects in the region, but also globally. So please welcome Mr. David Edmondson from Neom Green Hydrogen Company, Ms. Monica Trench from BP, Ms. Harriam Park from ENGIE, Mr. Mark Gelsenkirchen from ANA Consortium, and last but not least, Tony Neyman from Intercontinental Energy. Thank you. Okay, so to start with, I'd like to ask each of the moderators, each of the panelists to introduce themselves, as well as explain what the companies are doing in clean hydrogen. So maybe starting with you, Mark. Oh, ladies first.
Hello. Oh, so I'm Monica Trench from BP. I lead BP's hydrogen business in Oman. Thank you for having me on this panel. So at BP, we actually back in 2020, we set a strategy with the ambition to become net zero and to help the world to meet that goal too. And today, we remain focused on transitioning ourselves into integrated energy, with hydrogen being a key transition growth engine. And we do see hydrogen playing a vital role in helping the world get into net zero. And especially in hard-to-abate sectors. And we have a target by 2030 to produce 0.5 to 0.7 million tons of clean hydrogen per year. And with that goal in mind, we now have globally more than 10 projects across Europe, UK, the US, Australia, and the Middle East. And specifically, I guess, for the Middle East, we signed a project development agreement in June, as many of you may already know, and the project being in Duqm. And I guess with that project, we are hoping to build a project that is with 3.5 gigawatt of renewable power to produce 150,000 tons of hydrogen per year. So that is an ambition we have in this country, and we want to use the renewable energy efficiently in this country and to produce low-cost hydrogen. Should I stop here? I don't know how long we're supposed to go with our introduction, but hopefully that will give you a flavor of BP's hydrogen strategy and how our activities in Oman fits into the broader picture.
But then, if we continue with the ladies, Miss Yerin Park.
I'm Herin Park from NG. I'm a senior business developer for hydrogen projects in GCC. I originate projects from Saudi Arabia and Oman in particular. NG has been in Oman for a while. It's been 2 decades of business over here. We are a well-known name for IPP developer. We produce energy and water for Oman. As part of our energy transition initiative, hydrogen is a very important part of the business that we do in Saudi Arabia and Oman. And we have about 30 projects worldwide at different stages of development. Our target is to have 4 gigawatts of electrolyzer capacity by 2030. So recently, many of us, a lot of legacy projects and round 1 auction Hydrum has conducted have awarded 2 projects, and our project is one of them. So together with some of the East Asian partners, Korean partners who are part of off-taking entities with a Thai national company, we have formed a project company. It's a large consortium of 6 companies, and we've just incorporated a project company recently. So we had a signing ceremony yesterday of the shareholders agreement. That was a big milestone for us. So in this project, we're looking to produce 5 gigawatts of renewable energy on site. And we have 2.2 gigawatts of electrolyzer capacity to produce about 220,000 tons of hydrogen that would be transported to Duqm port to be converted into 1.2 million ton of ammonia. And this green ammonia is targeted specifically for a Korean market to decarbonize their coal-fired power assets to coal-fire with the green ammonia.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mark Geidenkirchen. I'm the project CEO for a project here in Oman, Project Amna. We have the project Amna, it's from a consortium, Amna Consortium. We have 3 main shareholders in the consortium. Local Al-Khara partners, part of the Hind Bhagwan group, then 2 international shareholders, one being a consultant from Denmark, Blue Power Partners, and the other one, our main financial shareholder, is Copenhagen Infrastructure Partners. So Copenhagen Infrastructure Partners is the largest, what we call power-to-X fund in the world. It has about $30 billion under management, and it has pledged to grow to $100 billion in 2030, making sure that many of the projects that they currently have in the pipeline are actually going to be executed. Our project is similar to the others, but it's also slightly different. We will be building wind turbines, we will be building solar panels, we will be building an electrolyzer, we will be producing green hydrogen, and about the same numbers, so we aim at 210,000 tons in the first phase. We will be transporting this hydrogen, this green hydrogen, to the port of Duqm, but we'd like to convert it in the port of Duqm to green steel, or green HBI, green DRI. So instead of making another derivative from it and exporting it, we'd like to use the green hydrogen in Oman itself, because we do believe that that is the future for this country, because it will have a much higher in-country value.
Thank you, Mark. Maybe David from Neom Green Hydrogen Company.
Yes, so good afternoon, everyone. My name's David Evanson. I'm the CEO from Neom Green Hydrogen Company. So just a little bit of background on the company. So it's an equal joint venture. There's 3 partners or 3 shareholders. Air Products, who are probably the largest own operator of hydrogen plants on a global basis. Aqua Power, who's a major renewables company across the Middle East, increasingly on a global stage. And Neom, who are based up in the northwest side of Saudi Arabia. So it's effectively a very good, very powerful joint venture, we say, because it's a combination of industry and government. And this is really, I think, one of the key areas that really help this project progress, because you've got very strong collaboration, very strong interests around trying to make this project work. It's underpinned, obviously, by Saudi's Vision 2030, where they have made some strong commitments around their aspirations to export low-carbon hydrogen. And within that mix, very much green hydrogen is part of that. So this project was started back in 2019. I think I've used this expression before, when green hydrogen wasn't necessarily a thing. You turned up at most conferences and people weren't talking about hydrogen. It maybe it's this topic in there, but you look nowadays, there are conferences on hydrogen the whole time, and quite rightly so. So the three chairmen of those three companies came together, primarily driven by Air Products, because at the end of the day, and I think we'll talk about it later on, we do have an off-taker. We have an off-taker for all the product for the next 30 years. And that's really what has made this project so different. So back in 2019, there was a commitment from Air Products that said, I want green hydrogen. I think the market will pay a premium. I want to be first in the marketplace. The costs are challenging, so we're going to go at scale. So wind the clock forward 3 years, about $900 million worth of investment by the shareholders very early on, before we had financial close or FID, really showed their commitment to making this project real. And then we went out for the financial launch in February 2022, and 15 months later, in May this year, we actually did get financial close. So we are one of the first, or the first, mega project at scale on green hydrogen. So the project's actually been in execution for the best part of 2 years now. We received our first wind turbines in October. The first 6 of 250. We'll have about 30 of those on site by the end of the year. So very much into full execution. One of the other interesting factors, so Air Products are an investor in the joint venture. They're the off-taker, but they're also the EPC contractor. So, and I think that combination really makes sure the focus on producing the lowest cost of hydrogen, lowest cost of ammonia is there. And one of the challenges we have with some of the projects that we have right now is everyone wants to make some money along that value stream. And it's very difficult in the market that we're in. But the project is moving. As I said, it's helped immensely by the fact that we had this offtake agreement. We had about 23 financial institutions as a combination of local Saudi, across the Middle Eastern region, and also international banks. So very much a lot of due diligence carried out on the business case, not just because the shareholders wanted to do it, but the banking and the lending community absolutely endorsed what we were doing and stand by it. So very exciting project.
Thank you. Hopefully we can learn a lot from the NEOM project. Maybe to conclude, Tony Neiman, if you want to introduce yourself and your company.
I'm Tony Neiman. I'm the head of the Middle East for Intercontinental Energy. We were established in 2014. We specialized in the development of mega-scale hydrogen projects. We have 3 projects in our portfolio, 2 of which are in Australia. We have the ARE project, 26 gigawatt projects, which is under development with BP as lead developer now. We have the WGH project in the south of Australia, which is 50 gigawatt, which we'll be developing in phases, same as the ARE project. And the last one, but of course not least, is the project in Oman. We're in the GEO venture. We entered Oman in end of 2017. We were at the forefront of the industry here. The development of these mega-scale hydrogen projects. In time, Enertech joined us as a partner, OQ joined us, and most recently Shell joined us as well and have become now the lead operator of GEO. GEO first phase is planned for 4 gigawatt. This was part of the round 1 auction process in Hydron, which we finalized in June of this year. It has extension options to 25 gigawatt, and we're now in the process of further developing that project now. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. So let's start with a rather generic question. We're hearing it all the time, but here we have really prominent developers. So I want again to ask a question. So why is concretely, in your opinion, the hydrogen industry not scaling faster? And I ask this question to Monica and then David.
So why is it not scaling fast enough? I think there are three main reasons. So I think one is around demand and offtake, which I think you mentioned earlier. I would say second, it's around infrastructure. And then third, I would say something around a regulatory framework. So let me try and expand on each one. So in terms of demand, I mean, for a lot of the first generation projects, we really are developing supply and demand at the same time. We're creating demand that currently is using a fossil fuel equivalent, and we're trying to encourage them to swap, substitute with green or low carbon hydrogen. So we really need industrial scale demand to underpin some of these projects at scale and to kick off the learning curve and hence to reduce the cost of production to start this virtuous cycle. And I think, beyond NEOM at the moment, at the moment, people talk about the desire for green, low carbon hydrogen, but the reality is, I think real offtake is limited. And with the elephant in the room on the cost of green hydrogen compared to its fossil fuel equivalents. So I would say that's challenge number one. I would say challenge number two is what I mentioned about infrastructure. And then this is infrastructure in terms of transporting hydrogen, so hydrogen pipeline, and export-import infrastructure, right? The shipping element and import-export terminals, and the fact the industry hasn't really converged onto in what form customers would like to receive the hydrogen in. So what kind of derivatives are we talking about? Or do we say actually, green steel is the preferred carrier of hydrogen? So I will say that's challenge number two. And then thirdly, it's around regulatory framework. I think we need favorable regulatory framework, both on the production side as well as on the demand side, some kind of transition incentive for industries to start adopting green hydrogen. And along similar lines, around certification, I think that's still a key issue. How do we classify low carbon hydrogen? What is the standard? I think the market is still evolving. The regulatory framework is still evolving. But I would say these are probably what I would summarize as the key challenges we currently see.
David, any other challenges? Obviously, you solved the offtake part, right?
Well, yes, I guess that's true. I mean, again, we agree with all of the points there. I think the biggest challenge is knowing what is the price of green hydrogen in the marketplace. And you sort of work back from there. And in the case of our particular projects, and again, just to provide some numbers because I realize I missed all of that out. So it's an $8.4 billion investment. We are producing 250,000 tons per year of hydrogen. We're actually producing it in the form of green ammonia, which is 1.2 million tons. Again, I'll just finish the numbers, then I'll get back to your question. So it's 4 gigawatts of renewables, it's 2.2 gigawatts of electrolyzer capacity. So those the ballpark numbers. So you're producing a lot of green hydrogen. It's a premium product. It costs more to make, and therefore you have to expect the consumers to pay more for it. And I think that's one of the challenges. There is no market price for green hydrogen right now. There's a view on what it should be. There's a recognition that it should be more expensive. And I think a lot of the investors that are looking at this, they want to know what their revenue stream is going to be like. They want to know they've got some form of guarantee or risk. And I think in many ways, because of the somewhat unique nature of our project, where you've got an off-taker there who's also an investor, who's also the EPC contractor, they've taken a view on the pricing. So they've effectively de-risked that project by taking some of the risk into the off-take side of it. And that's really what got, I think, the lenders much more comfortable. And again, when we've been developing the project, it's been over the last few years, as you rightly said, the legislative or the environment is not really understood. We were really focusing on Europe, RED II compliance. That's really how we configured our plant to make sure we could address that. But you have to create the demand side of it. And that really comes from industry committing to basically reduce their emissions, wanting low carbon hydrogen to feed into their businesses so they can meet their net zero commitments. If you've got that, and you've got commitments in there which are encouraged by government, whether it's through CBAM or some form of penalties for not complying, now the demand is going to come up and people are going to be prepared to pay a premium. So I think if you can address that, and I think we're moving down that line, is it there in enough force to give new investors the confidence to say, I'm going to put $8.4 billion or $10 billion in the ground? That's a decision they have to make.
Very good. And maybe now moving to so here we have the developers from the Omani side and NEOM, and all the projects are gigawatt scale, probably north of 1 million tons ammonia production, roughly. Are there any specific challenges when you are developing those sort of very large projects, be it from a technical standpoint, supply chain standpoint, financial standpoint, commercial standpoint? So what are the potential issues that you're facing? Maybe starting with you, Yarin.
So most well-known challenges, I think we all agree, the maturity of technology and also availability of qualified suppliers for the equipment. And also we mentioned earlier, off-taking issues, and as well as infrastructure. Are infrastructure ready? And at the same time, are regulations around the world, not just at geographies, but around the world, are they aligned? Because we're not dealing with specific geography, we're actually exporting it to different geographies. Now, today we're talking about the projects that have reached COD are still in double-digit megawatt scale. These are pilot projects. And today here we're talking about gigawatt projects, right, multiple times. And it's almost surreal. And the confidence that we have to build in these challenges within the next 3-4 years in order for us to reach COD at 2030, because most of our projects are targeting 2030, it's quite challenging in many different ways. But say, for example, in order for us to reach, we talk about bankability, the prices, feasibility quite often. But what I'm afraid sometimes is that in order to reach that feasibility or bankability, are we really solving the innate issues, or are we transferring risks in order for us to meet bankability? I think that's some of the things that we have to really face in reality. Say, for example, we talked about EPC prices quite a bit during the panels, right? And where is this EPC price, say, for example, can we target the cost effectiveness? If you have uncertainties in technology, obviously that would increase the price in the development cost, CapEx, and also operating cost. Now, having said that, if the DevEx and OpEx increases, that also impacts the way the shareholders look at the project, and also the lenders look at the project. You factor into risk premium, and then that also increases the price of the hydrogen at the end of the day. And now after that, you go out to the market and you're asking someone to absorb that premium, right? That's where the gap happens, right? And when the demand, on the demand side, at one end you're asking demand to be there, but in reality is a price something that you can absorb is the question. Now, having said that, you need to sort of understand where can we hedge this risk, not directly in each project basis, but maybe in a macroeconomic way, right? So one thing is regulation. Obviously, we have to understand that is there going to be enough subsidy both from production side and off-taker side in order to hedge that risk? And also, are governments investing enough, giving enough commitments to the infrastructure? Also, if you look at it in a different way, we're producing altogether, maybe in GCC, the net worth of the projects that are being developed around $70 billion US. Okay, 10 billion in Saudi, another 10 billion in UAE. In Oman, almost 50 billion. And we're all targeting 2030. So, say for example, if we have oversupply of hydrogen, are we talking to each other in some way to agree on a price line that we can all sort of work with, both in the demand side and the production side, so that we don't end up with all these assets that we developed that ends up being depreciated? That's the biggest risk. So we need to form an alliance, in a sense, between the developers, between the countries on both off-taking side and producing side, to understand the risk and allocate risk appropriately so that nobody ends up with a bomb full of a risk ending up under their lap, right? At the end of the day, if that ever happens, that would drop down the confidence in projects and nobody would want to work on or invest in these projects. So alliance between all of us, developers, are extremely important. Also, just looking at Duqm, I think you could probably relate from NEOM's perspective. Duqm right now is perhaps going to be a hub for all these industrial projects. But what we're not looking at yet is that would attract a huge workforce. We'll have people working there, living there. Are we providing enough social infrastructure for them to actually have a thriving economy, right? And on top of that, is it HSE compliant? Do we have hospitals, schools that could really embrace the growth of the economy and people? Because if you look at, let's say, oil and gas projects and mining industry, fly in, fly out costs, which are soft costs, actually has a great impact on the operational costs as well. So these are some of the answers that we need to look for, not in a siloed project perspective, but in all of us, right? Because we've got 6 projects in Duqm. Are we talking to each other to de-risk these uncertainties altogether?
Excellent point. And actually, I guess you, as project developers, will inevitably be talking to each other through the shared infrastructure that Oman is putting forward. And there's probably also collaboration on the supply chain side, right? If you're going to all be procuring the electrolyzers, the wind turbines, the solar panels, the certain number of manufacturers, and even these potential ICVs, so localization in Oman of those manufacturing plants. Maybe Tony Niemann, on the geo side, additional challenges that maybe Jeren didn't fully cover?
Yeah, so maybe expanding it a little bit beyond geo, but some of the other projects as well. And Hiren mentioned quite a number of challenges. So maybe let me drill into some of the technical challenges we're facing across the various projects. So one of the issues we're seeing, we're engineering already for years now, is this power intermittency, right? So the electrolyzers, some type of electrolyzers don't react very well to this power intermittency, and that creates quite a number of complexities. And so that requires a lot of engineering, because when you think of it, and this was discussed earlier in the previous panel, but the balance of plant is roughly 50% of that midstream cost, right? So in order to really get a good understanding of your costs, you have to engineer different type of electrolyzers and how that affects basically your balance of plant, and in order also to deal with this power intermittency, which is different for different type of electrolyzers. Then you have also the heat environment that we're operating with in the desert, which is quite different. You know, if you run an electrolyzer, say in Northern Europe, versus running that same electrolyzer here in a desert environment. Then you have storage issues, which the hydrogen storage issues. Now, for example, in the reference case here in Oman is, say, ammonia. You want to run those ammonia plants at your maximum efficiency to make it as cost effective as possible. That requires hydrogen storage to run them at constant high load. So those are a number of very specific technical challenges we're facing. And then if you then look at the whole system in its entirety, what we find is that the efficiency is really important. And that brings me then to the next challenge, which is also much discussed, of course, is the cost of the product. And of course, yes, I mean, there's a lot of demand for green energy, green hydrogen, but the buyers often want it at blue prices, right? So the cost there, what we're finding based on the engineering we're doing, is that capex, of course, is a major element, but even more important is actually the efficiency of the system. So it's that continuous engineering and re-engineering for the different type of electrolyzers and your system to bring down, of course, the capex, of course, but also improving that system efficiency, which basically has a nearly 3 times higher impact than the capex itself. So those are the sort of challenges we're facing and we're addressing over time through that rigorous engineering that I was referring to.
Any additional challenges, for instance, related to the higher financing costs in the current environment, or the wastewater that you will be producing? maybe in NEOM, have you faced those challenges? How are you dealing with them?
On the waste side, is
For
it?
instance, yes, the reject water.
So I guess we've got maybe another unique situation. So because it's a new region, NEOM themselves are developing their own infrastructure. And again, just picking up on the point made before, and I will answer your question. I think it is important where you have these developments, and I was very encouraged by some of the discussions early on where Oman are looking to develop an entire infrastructure around these plants, because these cannot just be export terminals. I mean, I think there's a huge opportunity to change the whole industrial landscape with this and create new industries, and I think we're all talking about it, but it does require a lot of support from the local government, the country, to invest in that, to make commitments. And maybe there are commitments around off-taking certain percentages of hydrogen and forcing industries to invest and take that. So I think that's a huge benefit. I think, again, in the example, I think of some of Dukum, I think where the government are actually investing in the water system, the desalination plants. And it's the same up in NEOM as well. So there's a massive investment there in full desalination capabilities. They're actually looking at zero liquid discharge as well. So they're actually collecting the brine and looking at those options rather than putting it back in the sea. But the whole infrastructure there demands a lot more around the water side. The power side is interesting because in the case of NEOM, one of the NEOM affiliates, a company called Enoa, are going to take over the power system and they'll run it within that region. Their ambition is to run the entire region on renewables. And again, I think that sort of complements a lot of the commitments that they're making around renewables, their commitment to clean industries and encouraging other green industries there. So, hopefully at some point we'll be doing something similar that Oman are talking about, looking at putting green steel there. And again, rather than exporting hydrogen or ammonia or energy to other parts of the world, you're exporting green products.
So now that we discussed a bit of the big challenges of developing these gigawatt scale projects, now let's discuss concretely what you as developers are trying to do. So we're starting with Mark. So in AMNA Consortium, how are you trying to cope with these challenges?
No, I think I'm quite positive always, so I don't see these challenges at all. I think we're fine. So the moment we have an off-taker, these projects will run. And then we have to optimize, and we will optimize. But the moment our project is also somewhere between $6 and $7 billion. The moment I need to get the electrolyzers, I will get them. It might not be as fast as I wanted. It might be at another price than I wanted. They might not be as efficient as I want, but I will get what I want. So I think the most important point in this whole discussion is getting the off-taker, what everyone actually addressed. And once that is there, then the projects will all happen. All the projects that will have an off-taker will happen. So I don't see many challenges there. There are challenges in the same, in the optimization. So we have to make sure that our logistics is actually working. We did a very fast calculation. If we put all the stuff that we need for our project in trucks, and then we put these trucks in a row, and then we assume that between every truck is a truck space, then we have a row of trucks from Sohar to Salalah and back. So that is 2,600 kilometers, 2,731 kilometers of trucks that we foresee. That's our project, but there are a few more. So we think it's very interesting to plan and to make sure that, for instance, our port infrastructure is in order, that there are enough cranes. But looking at the shipping market, we should also all look at the possibility of all these wind turbines, many going to NEOM. We also need the ships to bring them to us. We also need quite a lot of cranes in this country to actually erect all these wind turbines. And it will all happen, but if we want to make it a bit efficient, we should all plan, and indeed, we should all look together. And I think extremely important, what has been said is we also need to have a very clear look at the development of Dukum. So if we want families to come and live in Dukum, we need to make sure that there is schooling, that there is amusement, that there is sports, that the city really develops. And I think that's a really important message that is given today.
Mark. On the offtake side, yes, indeed it's the major challenge. You mentioned that in your project you're trying to secure something around green steel, right? Any particular type of player? Or, I mean, what's your approach to try to find an off-taker in that area?
Yeah, it's a bit a technical story. So normally a steel, a DRI producer, reduced steel, reduced iron, will use gas and will produce quite a lot of carbon dioxide. So we're looking at the possibility of using H2 in a DRI plant, as it's called. So it's making direct reduced iron. From direct reduced iron, you can make hot briquetted iron. Hot briquetted iron you can transport, or you can turn it where we are into steel. So basically, this is the process to turn a carbon-emitting industry a bit greener. And we're talking to all the serious steel players in the world that all have a decarbonization strategy. But the challenge is big. So I can tell you, if you look at a rather small plant, 2.5 million tons plant, which maybe is an investment of $1 or $1.5 billion for the steel manufacturer, then if we provide that steel manufacturer with green hydrogen and with green electricity, we will soon be looking at about $10 billion investment. So to power a factory worth $1.5 billion, we will be investing $10 billion. And I think this is one of the challenges too, and that is the fact that all these green hydrogen projects, green energy projects, have an enormous capex and hardly any opex. And that is actually something that the banking industry is not quite accustomed to and not yet very happy to finance.
Thank you. I mean, NEOM, green hydrogen company, you're a few years ahead of the Omani project. So what are some of the practical things you've done to move ahead with the project besides securing the offtake with their products? What are things, you know?
Yeah, so the on-stream, we're targeting end of 2026. Again, maybe just go back to some of the commitments a lot of the countries are making around the region. So again, we started 2019. It took us 3.5 years to get to FID. It's going to take another 3 and a bit years to get to full commercial operation. The commitments from Oman, I heard, were 1 million tons per year by 2030 of green hydrogen. I think Saudi Arabia's made 4 million tons per year of clean hydrogen, a combination of green. And Europe are committing to import 10 million tons. I just don't see how it adds up, really. Because, I mean, for Oman, and it's green hydrogen, so it's 4 times NEOM. And if we're not going to get FID in the next couple of years, it's going to be really challenging. So a lot of these projects I think the aspirations are absolutely right. I think the impetus should be there. I mean, right now, we're just focusing on executing. I mean, we can declare success, but we achieve nothing apart from getting financial close. We actually have to finish the project. It has to do what we said it would do. We have to look at ways to improve it. And already, again, we're already hiring our operating team. We've actually got another 20 megawatt electrolyzer in NEOM, which we're going to use as our test bed. So we're seeding the local market with hydrogen, which is what NEOM want to do. So that will encourage hydrogen for mobility. That will address some of the trucks. So we're already starting to decarbonize the construction phase of what they're doing in NEOM as well. But the important thing is using that to start investing in the next generation coatings, for example, and the electrolyzers. So I think this is an ongoing process. And again, I think you asked earlier on about what's constraining people from making some of those decisions. I think everyone's waiting for that breakthrough. You know, and sometimes you just have to make the commitment and go. And I think what we're hearing from some of my colleagues here is we've made the commitment to go at scale. So we've addressed some of that step change in technology by getting the benefits of scale. So yeah, the focus right now is very much on we need to build it, we need to hit our on-stream, we need to start delivering product, we need to seed the market. And in the meantime, our off-taker are busy looking at investing in receiving terminals. They have the benefit of the fact they're an established infrastructure there. So the supply chain already in Europe, which is one of their target market, already exists. But they're still going to take the ammonia, break it down to hydrogen, either liquefy it, put it in pipelines. So there's a lot of work to be done.
Thank you. So now, if we move a bit away from the individual project, but look at the region, we see that the countries in the region have very ambitious green hydrogen strategies. So Oman, with this green auction process targeting to produce 1 million ton by 2030, UAE also close to that 1 million ton, and Saudi Arabia planning to become the largest exporter of clean hydrogen. what concretely can those countries do to support the scale-up of the industry? Is it policy support, providing infrastructure? I mean, what are you expecting from the government, you as developers? I'll ask this question to Tony from Intercontinental.
So maybe if I look at Oman, Oman has obviously done a lot already. So if I look at the regulatory framework, the establishment of Hydrom, the auction process, the common infrastructure we heard about this morning is making great stride as well. So from a government perspective, a lot has been achieved. Now that these projects have been awarded, I would say I would actually come back to the projects again themselves. I think it's now up to the projects to start delivering, to make progress, which will require the resources, the willingness to spend, to de-risk these projects going forward. We heard David talk about the timelines. It's becoming urgent. If Oman wants to meet the targets, the 2030 targets, yes, we need to move now. And each project will go its way. The project will be somewhat different as well, although there are similarities amongst these projects. The ventures are structured with different parties. There are different locations. They're maybe closer to Duqm or projects are in Salalah. All these projects will have their individual challenges. So I think from what I could expect looking forward, I think from a government perspective is now to look at it more granularly on a project by project basis in order to enable these projects to move forward. But it now really boils down, I think, if we want to meet these 2030 targets, for the project itself to deliver, considering that the government themselves have made all these strides which I just mentioned. So I wouldn't expect too much more from that perspective, but more at the individual project level to start now delivering on the promises.
Thank you. Monica, any additional comments here on the BP side? What are you expecting from the Omani government?
I think my fellow panelist, Tony, has summarized it quite well. I mean, I totally agree. I think so far the clarity on hydrogen strategy in Oman has been very helpful, and providing a framework, setting up Hydrom, providing the framework on how hydrogen projects will be developed in country. I think I think looking forward, I agree, it's now about executing these projects and how the local regulatory framework can help these projects to overcome the challenges. I won't repeat them. I feel like there's a lot of big and small challenges that my fellow panelists have mentioned, all the way from having the right schools and hospitals to kind of larger problems around, not problems, but kind of larger issues we all need to deal with around infrastructure, ports, and trucks, and having all these turbines coming through, etc. And I will say lastly will be attracting industries to set up in Oman that will potentially create local demand. It will be super helpful, because I think, let's be realistic, a lot of the first generation projects could be de-risked or be underpinned if they could be local demand of hydrogen, similar to the green steel examples, to underpin those early projects while the import-export infrastructure is yet to be developed. I think, let's face it, the export-import infrastructure, there's a lot yet to be done, and it has its own challenges. So I think being able to create local or domestic demand could really help these projects to take off.
And do you see that sort of pressure or incentive to create the local demand in Oman? Because we see with all the policy support, policy push from the EU, the demand is barely there yet. So how can Oman actually go faster?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think once again it comes to also incentives that works in a different way. I think, yes, the EU also have certain incentives for the industry to adopt green hydrogen. I mean, I think in EU it has its own context. I think there are regulatory framework being set up, there are incentives, but it's also the implementation of them that is driving the speed of actual industry adoption.
Thank you. Maybe any final remarks from both Yarin and Mark, and then given a bit ahead of time, we could move into a bit of Q&A from the audience. So maybe Yarin.
So as I said earlier, I think alliance between project developers and governments much needed. And also in terms of policy and regulations, as much as defining is needed, some flexibilities also need to be considered. Say, for example, today we're creating an economy, a new economy of hydrogen, but is it only hydrogen that we're looking at? At the end of the day, green hydrogen is produced through renewable energy. So could we have an integrated regulation, policies, strategies around renewable generation of the country on top of hydrogen? Can we interact with one another? Because at the end of the day, imagine a lot of projects that we look at today are sort of off-grid, in a sense, siloed projects that are custom designed for certain off-takes. Perhaps that's why that off-take risk is so talked about. But what if it's integrated with national renewables strategy, where you can remain flexible, you can draw down on certain green energy from the grid, or you can supply back to the grid. Or if you have multiple projects in the region, could we share renewable energy? So some of these policies and strategies need to be talked between the government and also between the developers and create an alliance, and therefore creating a whole new economy. So in order for us, all of our projects to be successful, we need to work together. And I think that's the key to creating a new market rather than trying to compete with each other, because it's very nascent right now, right? We need to work together to make the market first and maybe compete later, right?
Mark?
I think it's, you probably know who is the largest gas user in Oman. It's the port of Sohar and all its industries. And this morning we saw in the presentations, we saw a possibility, I think, and that is draw a pipeline to Sohar. It's a mere 500 kilometers of pipeline. Feed the industry, where possible, with green hydrogen in Sohar, knowing that that comes at an extra cost, but you also save the gas. And the natural gas can actually be sold again against a higher price, mostly, than what you're delivering it at the industry in Sohar. So if we could fund that from the government, we could actually give an enormous push towards the green hydrogen industry, and we could be in a shining example as Oman going forward. So I think if we can have a concentrated area with a lot of industry, and as former CEO of the Port of Sohar, I know that is Sohar, that could be an extremely good way to promote green hydrogen in Oman and make sure that we all start producing. Because the moment that there's an enormous market somewhere, we'll all start. Because the problem is, if I start working for a green steel factory, if I start producing hydrogen for a green steel factory, I only have one consumer. If that consumer fails, my project fails. If I have a whole market that I can deliver to, I'll start building tomorrow. That will not be an issue.
Thank you, Mark. And thank you all. I think it's a very insightful discussion. We really heard about the concrete challenges that some of the largest developers are facing, but also how they are trying to address those challenges. We have a few minutes left, so I don't know if we can take a few questions from the audience. Anyone? There's one over there. Mike, yes.
You. Hello, hi, good evening. My name is Naveen Ehlawat and I'm from Vulcan Green Steel. My question is to David first and then to Park. So David, two questions. First is about the premium during your off-taking. Did you get some premium on the green product which you are intending to produce? And second question is about how you are navigating or navigated the round-the-clock power for your ammonia plant. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, thank you for the question. So I guess on the the premium, I mean, there's a price for grey hydrogen, which I think is fairly well understood in the marketplace. There is no known price for green hydrogen, but there is a known cost. Well, but every individual developer knows their own particular cost, and they have their own expected returns. I think again, going back down to the somewhat unique nature of what we've got within the Neom Green Hydrogen Company, is we have an off-taker who's prepared to take a view on what that price is in the marketplace. So they've looked at the European market, the Asian market, they've looked at what people potentially would pay in terms of a premium, and they've worked back to what they can afford to pay basically at the jetty, because we're selling at a jetty within Neom, our product. And the maths has to work, so they have to pay enough for the whole investment to make sense in the eyes of the shareholders and the lenders. So Air Products at the end of the day have taken a view on where they think the pricing will be. Again, it's back down to risk. I mean, that is a fairly large risk. It's a 30-year risk because there is committed pricing all the way through. And again, that's the reason we managed to get to financial close. And that's really what drove it. I think on your other question, which was on the renewables, so we own our own renewables. So we've effectively got our own private grid. We own the wind turbines, we own the solar panels. There's over 250 wind turbines. There's I think over 5 million solar panels. We've got our own private grid, which has never been done before in Saudi Arabia. We have a connection to the grid. That's mainly to enable us to do the startup. So when we start the wind turbines and solar, we need a load. We could bring load banks in, but we're exporting a little bit. But once it's up and running, effectively it's full renewables. And we need that in order to be able to deliver zero carbon, effectively, product at the jetty. And then when Air Products pick that up, they'd have to then work out how much carbon gets attracted all the way through to, say, in this case, Rotterdam. They'll break it back down from ammonia back to hydrogen. That will attract more carbon, and then they'll distribute it, which is more carbon. And that has to stay beneath the levels set by the European government around carbon intensity. But yes, we own our own renewables. And again, there was a discussion on CapEx versus OpEx. I mean, the biggest challenge in doing a project this size, CapEx is probably a little bit easier in some ways. It's working out the OpEx on some of the technologies which have not been run at this level for 30 years. You have to take a view, and that's why you need the expertise of a renewables company and an industrial gas company, so you can help translate that into, I now have credibility in my OpEx model.
Thanks, David. One question to Park. So when Park, when you are expecting your FID to be closed for this project coming up in Duqm?
It's Hayron. I know my name is difficult to pronounce, but it's Hayron. For these projects that were tendered from Hydrum, that was the first round, we are expecting to produce hydrogen by 2030, which means that FID should happen around 2026 or latest by 2027. So FID and shortly after the financial closure. And quite similar to the NEOM project, we have committed offtake from upfront. So it's a customized project. And this project is meant to serve a national decarbonization of Korea. So from Korean end, the coal-fired power plant requires to have a supply of green ammonia by 2030 in order to meet the decarbonization roadmap for the specific coal assets.
So can we understand that there will be at least 20-25-year offtake agreement that you will be agreeing with your offtaker?
Yes, this is a little bit of a, so earlier in during my comments on the policies where we really need to align ourselves regardless of the geography, this is where my comment comes from. So this has to do with the subsidy scheme in Korea, where, for example, in Korea, they're tendering at the moment hydrogen power supply. So basically, these GenCos, what we call GenCos are KEPCO subsidiaries, KOSPO, AWP, who are part of our consortium. They bid on the supply auction that is managed by Korean Power Exchange. And once they win the bid, they get the right to produce 20 years of hydrogen-powered decarbonized power. So basically, they win that right to do that. So that's back-to-back with a government subsidy. So that's what we're serving. I hope that answers that question. So it would be 20 years in Korea, so back-to-back to our supply, which is another 20 years.
Thank you so much. Thanks, David. Thank you.
Any further questions? One there and then here.
This is Najah Al-Mahanna from German University in Oman. Since we are speaking about the challenges, it is in your mind the challenge of skilled workers, technicians, engineers. I think this is a main part of the sustainability of any project. And also in terms, we heard about the optimization and how to get maybe higher efficiency or maybe rechange things in the plant. What is your plan or idea about the collaboration with the local universities in terms of R&D? Thank you.
Want to take this? Mark, you know Oman quite well.
I even know the German university quite well. So this is part of our plans, and this is part of the things we have been discussing with the government as well as Hydrom. So it is quite a large scala of things. So we're talking about getting students into Danish universities, as we have Danish partners. We're talking about setting up a research center in Oman together with the Omani universities. So we have a whole list of activities that we're currently doing and that we will increase over the coming years to make sure that we have the skills, the technology, but also indeed the R&D in this country. So I think this is an extremely good chance for Oman to attract industry, to expand the number of jobs, but also and absolutely to get a center of expertise in Oman, and to make sure that R&D facilities, that universities, that the spin-offs of this all can happen here. And a very nice example is, you probably know ASML, you know Philips. These are all spin-offs of the University of Eindhoven. So it's one university in the Netherlands that has enormous large companies around them because they have the university and its R&D. And I think that this is, again, one of the most important things to develop. And by the way, coming back to Ian, part of that should certainly happen also in Dukem.
Great. I think there was one question here in the middle.
Hi, this is Sultan from OQ Alternative Energy. The question is for Mr. David. I heard you about the funding strategy you have developed for a NEOM project, and the question is, was it a challenge, was it a risk to the project? And the second question is, what are the top challenges or top risks you have faced on your project?
Okay, so yeah, thank you for the question. So I guess on the funding side of it, I guess was it a challenge? We were doubly oversubscribed in the end. So I think we had a very compelling business case. So on that side, we managed to attract a lot of people who wanted to invest in our project, which was good. In order to do that, though, you have to be able to come up with a very credible business case. And that's why we spent the best part of 2.5 years optimizing what we were doing, linking up with the right partners. We selected all our technology partners during the bid phase. So we made some commitments around the electrolyzer supplier, the ammonia loop supplier. Obviously, the air separation was a little bit easier. And some of the other potential slightly step-out technologies, because we wanted to work with them during the bid phase so that, one, it was going to be a win-win. So if we could not get optimized costing, optimized performance, you can integrate the whole system. So by the time the benefit of doing that is when you went out to the market for the lenders, they were asking more detailed questions about how the plant would work, and we could answer all of that because we'd already done the configuration, we'd done the optimization, we knew why we needed 250 wind turbines and why we hadn't invested more in electrolyzers, and we could answer all those questions. So that gave a lot more strength to our argument over that. I think it also helped because the shareholders also showed their commitment by offering up $900 million worth of capital or equity, should we say, even before we'd gone out for the financial launch. I'm sorry, I missed the second part of the question. Or I've forgotten it.
Thank you for the answer. And the second question was, what are the top risks you have faced on this project or has been assessed for this project?
I mean, the first one was how do you configure the plant? Because there was no end market. How do you define green hydrogen? So we basically, the decision was made very early on. And in some ways, It's a very strict interpretation, was to follow the Renewable Energy Directive in Europe with the temporal correlation, geographical correlation. And that was actually quite hard to do, but at least you gave you a really strong basis. So that took, I guess, that risk away and gave us the confidence as we worked our way through, we wouldn't have an issue in terms of defining the product and being able to represent it as low carbon. I mean, the bigger challenges in some ways was actually looking at the operating side of it, because you've got a 30-year period. You've made decisions on the capital that you've invested, and you now need to know over the next 30 years, I have to optimize performance in order to drive down those costs. And you're basically making those commitments when you go to financial close, because all of that gets put into the financials in any case. I think the skill side of it, I mean, I think there was several discussions around attracting the right talent. I think, certainly in the case of Saudi Arabia, renewables is fairly well established. I think one of our partners, Aquapower, they set up a training college, they sponsored students to go there, they provided that education, and now there's more and more of people in that area. I think finding the skills in renewables is not such an issue. The industrial gas side of it, or the plant side of it, it's fairly well established, but I think there are some new industries here. You've also got a lot of enthusiasm from the youth. You know, even yesterday, I think at the masterclass, there were students from Exeter University, local universities here. They're interested, they're going in, they're studying hydrogen. That was a great session by Wally. That's what we should be doing. I think that's what industry should be paying back, because that could be a challenge in the future, is getting the right talent in the right place.
Thanks, Mr. David. So, as you are in the construction phase right now, so was it also the EPC contractor and dealing with different streams as upstream, midstream, and downstream, different types of skills or specialty? Was it a difficult or a challenge to find an overall EPC contractor?
Well, okay, so the investor, Air Products basically are our EPC contractor. As I said, they're the investor in the joint venture, they're the off-taker, and they have the engineering skills in order to do that. I mean, they're not well known as an EPC contractor, but I think it's public information. Their project stack currently sits around $29 billion. So they know how to do EPC contracts, but it's mainly around the industrial space. So if you look at, you know, the project, roughly 50-50 split between the power elements and the industrial side of it. Air Products as an EPC contractor don't have that expertise, relied very heavily on Aquapower, who are a renewables company. How did they do that? But effectively, we have an EPC wrap, which means that you're protecting the lenders from any exposure through an EPC contract. And then underneath that, we've got other contractors. So we went to Larsen & Toubro for the power side, and we went to CCC for the industrial side, which played to their strengths. So Air Products is the overall, and then managing two subcontractors, and then a series of smaller subcontractors under that.
Thank you, Mr. David. That's very interesting, and we're looking at you as an example.
Well, thank you very much for the questions. I'm afraid we're running out of time, because I think some of the panelists have another session right now. One final question, is that okay, or you need to run? Yeah? So I saw one in the middle there.
Thank you for the very useful discussion. Ali from OQ Gas Network. Thank you, Javier. It's a question to Hiren and maybe everyone, all the other developers in Duqm. You mentioned the challenges in terms of having Duqm a good place to live, and obviously the ramp up of these projects, if they happen concurrently, you could have thousands of workers and everything. What's the forum you're using to raise these, and is there any master planning with the Duqm authorities, or is it through Hydrom, and how can they help in this regard?
Okay, well, since I raised the question, obviously at a developer level, there's only a certain limited amount of, let's say, a budget for us to take care of the project itself. But this is a discussion we should have with the government, right? For us, for our partnership, we've entered into an MOU with OPAS earlier, so that we can have a discussion regarding the downstream land as well as the infrastructure around it. I think it's definitely an intent from our side to engage with different developers and also with Hydrom to address this issue, yes? I hope that answered the question.
I can also add to that. I think in what form are we raising this? I mean, there are lots of ways we're doing this already. BP also has MOU with OPAS, and we're working with various stakeholders and in anticipation of various needs at, the port area and the Dokkum area to enable these projects to be developed. MEM has set up, and together with Hydrom has set up a hydrogen advisory board together with all the developers, and which has been a useful forum for us to discuss kind of common issues where we get to hear each other's views as well as to voice our thinking around what needs to be done to enable the projects, as well as getting insights from each other. I hope that's helpful.
One thing I would like to add, though, is that I see an opportunity there. It's a good public-private partnership opportunity to build a let's say, social infrastructure, such as housing or schools or hospitals that may be serving the region. And maybe it's not just all government's responsibility. It's not just private sector's responsibility. This could be also a very good business opportunity.
So maybe it's also good to look at the other examples again. So in Sohar, a few of the larger companies have formed a fund together, and for instance, they started a school. So I think together, there's no competition in this part. We can only work together and make sure that this is going to happen.
Absolutely, yes.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you everyone for attending and for the questions, and of course, thank you to the panelists.